who chimes in today.
Yeah, here we are. Here we are live once again.
Here we are live.
Here, live, coming at you.
Yeah.
Digging the Dharma. Yeah.
And yeah, digging the Dharma indeed. And I guess we should officially start the podcast.
We should. Yeah.
Just to get things moving, and then I guess I'll start. You started last week, so I'll start this week. I think
that sounds perfect. I'll put this.
Okay.
Yeah, put do not disturb on, so everything is good. All right.
Actually, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Although I did turn my phone off. Okay. All right. So, greetings, Doug. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you, John? I have to say, I've got workmen working on our house right now, doing a whole bunch of stuff outside. So there's probably going to be banging and hammering and so on while we're talking. But I'm assuming we can,
I think
we'll
it'll work. And these filters are pretty amazing. There's some. Well, actually, it's all right now. Earlier this morning in our daily sit, I had just read a beautiful Zen poem by EQ called "The Fisherman," where he talks about just getting rid of just forgetting the stiff meditation, forgetting all the study you've been doing, and just listen to the fisherman's song, and how beautiful it is, and it's a great little poem, and then, of course, immediately there was like a car alarm outside. And then, so I had to segue, it's like, okay, so what's your fisherman's song? Is it the car alarm? Is it the dog barking? It was great. So we'll see what your fisherman's song is.
Yeah.
And at least, here I'm sure there too, the weather has finally sort of cleared a bit. So we have a nice day that's not where I don't have the AC on at all. Yeah. And
oppressively hot.
Yeah, so I'm happy for that, and so I guess we're
have some comments here already, which is great. Comments
I'm not seeing them, so I'm gonna have to go and do this again. Oh, yeah, okay, great.
There we go. Xiaomao from Germany says hello. Western Australia, thank you.
Yeah,
and from California, no self. Just to remind everybody that we're doing this live, and we're recording it obviously for the podcast, but if you want to come and ask questions, please feel free to do so, or just say hello, or don't say anything, just watch if you want. So it's fun to have anybody who wants to be part of the live stream, or if you don't have time, obviously just listen to the podcast.
So what is our topic today?
Well, interesting one that I get asked a lot about on my, Doug's Dharma YouTube channel. People will ask about the sort of 4 stages along the path, the 4 sort of traditional stages that we go through towards enlightenment. There's the first one being stream entry, and then there's once returning, and then there's non-returning, and then there's the arahantship, or the enlightenment, nirvana itself.
Yeah.
And so I mean, there's a lot of ways we can go with this. What are they, and are they important, and all the rest? And I think we'll try to get into some of that.
Yeah, and they're actually, I was reading, there are pre-stream entry categories as well.
Oh, good. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like faith follower, I think it's sort of somebody who's sort of made the commitment, and there's one other after that, but. So that was, I found it, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. I know it's there, and I don't get asked very often about it. So I'm happy to talk about it. I'll never forget, there was many years ago at New York Insight, there was a man who was a serious practitioner. He was a student, I think, of actually, in the end, I think he went to Tanjef's monastery in California, Tansoro Bhikkhus, and we had a visiting monastic, and I had actually invited this monastic to come and teach, and I'll never forget this, like comment that this guy made. He said, "Oh, this guy's, he's really advanced. He's at least a stream. He's certainly a stream mentor. He may be a non-returner." And it's like, it's like, what? I didn't actually know these things much then at all, but I was just kind of stunned that he was like trying to like determine where he was on these stages. And I think that's part of the problem. It's like, who's telling you where you are, and I think it's much more a matter of knowing your moments of fruition, as it were. Fruition being those moments where there's a sudden realization, and then how long you hang out in that realization before you're sucked back into our sort of habitual way of being, right? And so I think it might be helpful, Doug, if you at least, because I know you have it there, describe the qualities or the qualifications, even, your checklist as to whether you're one or the other, that could be helpful. And then we can get into kind of what's the point.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're traditionally, I'll go through sort of the traditional understanding here, which is in stream entry, which is this first stage, it's said that in order to gain that stream entry, you overcome the first sort of three fetters, three of the lower fetters, that being identity view, which is sort of a conceptual idea of your identity as being a permanent thing. The other one being clinging to rites and rituals, that is some kind of a belief that you can become liberated through simply doing certain kinds of rituals or following certain kinds of rules. And the third one being doubt. And the idea here, I think, with stream entry is supposed to be that there comes a time in your practice where doubt is overcome, either through any one of a number of different ways. One way that people talk about is you have an immediate, you have a breakthrough. You're able to see nirvana, as it were, for a glimpse of it for a moment. That clears up all your doubts about the possibility of gaining nirvana, and also clears up any thought you had that you gained it through performing certain kinds of rituals over and over again. So anyway, that's sort of stream entry. And then
but one should say also, like the idea of stream entry is that once you're in that stream, you can't stop. You're
that's
just,
right.
Going to continue down the stream.
That's right.
In a good way, obviously.
Yeah, and so you'll never be reborn in a hell realm. That's another aspect. Right. I mean, there's also rebirth aspects of this, obviously.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And it's said that you only have a maximum of 7 lifetimes before you become enlightened. I think there's only like a handful, maybe even one text in the early tradition that actually says that. So, who knows what? Yeah, I mean, and also who knows whether this stuff is later interpolation, whether it's original.
Right.
I want to get into a little of that in a moment, but anyway, the second one is called a once returner. Where the idea being that you are going to be born in one more lifetime in this world before you become enlightened. And in order to gain that, it says that you diminish your sensual desire, your ill will, and your delusion, but they don't go away, but they're just diminished somewhat. So it's sort of an in-between kind of stage. The third one is another in-between kind of stage called non-returner, which is where it's said that you're not going to be reborn into this kind of a life. That is to say, a life in the physical realm, in the material realm, but you're reborn into a non-material realm, a kind of a perfect realm from which to attain enlightenment. And it said that the non-returner is free from sensual desire and ill will. That is to say, they're free from any attachments to the physical or form realm. And that's why they're not going to be reborn into the physical or form realm. However, they still have they're what are called the higher fetters, these kind of very, very subtle fetters having to do with attachment to stages of meditation, such as the jhanas or formless realms, also conceit and restlessness, and the last tinge of ignorance. Those are the sort of higher fetters that, they're sort of lessened, or I should say some of them are lessened in the non-returner. And then, and of course, the arahant gives them all up. So so that's the picture. That's the traditional picture. Now, there's a really good paper by from a while back by a scholar named Joy Manet, where she goes through this in a sort of a historical sense and argues that a lot of this may be later. In other words, may not go back to the Buddha himself, may be a later development. In particular, there are a couple of early texts which are really quite interesting, where stream entry is defined simply as as confidence in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and generosity and charity. So, in that sense, she believes that originally stream entry was basically an example of simply becoming, sort of feeling like you're becoming a Buddhist. In other words, sort of, once you join the Buddhist religion, it wasn't really thought of as a religion, but belief system.
Follower.
Follower. Once you follow the Buddha Dharma, that would be enough to be a stream enterer. And that over time, this became more elaborated, and then the other stages were sort of added on later. She has various reasons why they may have been done that way. Of course, that's going to be somewhat controversial. With traditional believers are not going to follow that. But anyway, that's one thought.
Right, and I mean, you would know better than I, but I can't think of any sutta where the Buddha does refer to arahants, I believe, but he doesn't. For sure. He doesn't talk about stream enterers. He doesn't talk about
non-returners
or once.
Yeah. There are suttas where he certainly talks about stream entry. As I say, there are ones where he defines it in different ways. So it sort of depends on pick your sutta. And I think there are a few also where he talks about non-returners and once returners. Not so many, but there are some. So and then
yeah. So I can imagine why it sort of got formalized at some point, because they were trying to determine who was where in the hierarchy. I mean, it's very hierarchical, of course, and then you sort of put it in the context of the monastic world, and who eats first, or now in a monastery, and regardless of how, and this is actually in. This would lead to a whole other discussion, but regardless of where one of the female monastics is on the path, they still have to go after the men. And that that may be a fairly recent thing. I don't know, but it's pretty.
I think that would have been gone quite a ways back. Yeah, I think it's certainly in the Vinaya.
And so what happens, of course, is that people are trying to achieve a certain thing, right? And that goal of there's nothing wrong with the goal, of course, but if you're striving so hard, you never kind of get it. And then there was, do you call yourself an arahant?
Some people do.
I know. Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but it's who. Even do you say, "Oh, I'm a fully awakened person"? That alone is a self view, of course. So it's or an identity view. It's and so it really it puts the practice to a test, because mostly those beings that I've met that are clearly far down the path, they don't go around boasting about it at all. It's just in the way they are. And then so we're recording this in mid-July of 24, and it's how does this fit into the world? And so it's and of course we're talking about the early traditions, not the Mahayana, which has its own. The various traditions in Mahayana, of course, have their own stages, I suppose. When is somebody ready to pointing out instructions are based on somebody's progress and where they are, and so it's a teaching technique and a teaching tool in many ways, I suppose, or a way of observing like where someone is. So yeah, I mean, how do you tell if somebody has really let go of ill will completely, and let go of all sense, lust of any sense desire? Really, it's like, where does? Yeah, I mean, so it's useful and it's also problematic, I guess. It's
Yeah,
kind of
I mean,
interesting.
and there's, I mean, I absolutely agree. I mean, there are ways in which these kinds of lists can be helpful to us in our practice, but there are also lots of ways that they can help to foment conceit. The comparing mind, who's better than
Yeah,
others,
right.
um, or in Chogyam Trungpa's phrase, spiritual materialism, or we're sort of trying
Hmm.
to, you know,
Get that title.
get that title, get that thing.
Yeah.
We have let me put up the comment. We have a comment from somebody from Sundered Psyche. I do feel like the human urge to categorize these concepts of personal growth in some ways goes against non-self. Yeah, they can certainly, as I say, foment conceit. This idea that
Yeah.
we are a real, I have a real being here that's persisting and that has value because I've done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me of a well-known cartoon. It's like a guy's in a bookstore and there's a whole set of shelves. It says non-self-help.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, right, personal growth. These concepts of personal growth in some ways go against non-self. And personal growth is necessary at times, right? Because we can also talk about spiritual bypassing here, right? It's like somebody's got all sorts of issues, including the person you just quoted, Trungpa Rinpoche. It's like many personal issues.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not like that he was bypassing, but others were bypassing for him in a sense. Oh, he's so awake that whatever his flaws are don't matter, but they do matter, and he was certainly somebody who was sadly, and killed him really, taken over by sense desire, and
Alcoholism.
he
Yeah.
harmed a lot of people in the
Yeah.
process, including himself, of course. Sexual addiction perhaps as well. So it's like, and yet, he was obviously a brilliant teacher, and certainly, I don't think he would have. I don't know that anybody asked him like how far along he was, but he probably wouldn't have said. He would just have said, "Here I am," And I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's
I don't know. I don't know.
interesting uh, to see how we can over-identify with these stages, and so what I think is really important now, right, after kind of doing my best not to watch any of the political convention that just ended. And those of you from other countries, I'm sure, are aware of what's going on here. I have a good friend who lives in Paris who always says the whole world should vote for the American president, which is certainly true.
Yes.
In any event, it's like, where is the world in terms of these, these categories, and how, if we're really, looking at the tradition of the Bodhisattva ideal, that which is not part of the early traditions per se, even though the Buddha was certainly a Bodhisattva in prior lives, and even in his life as a Buddha, he was sharing the Dharma and trying to wake everybody up. And if it's the other challenge with these, or maybe it's a misinterpretation of a lot of the earlier teachings, that it's all about my awakening. it's the awakening of the individual, and that's fine. And yet, one could also say that if somebody is like fully achieved, fully awakened, is an arahant, how are they then taking that into the world, and how is it bringing the world up around them?
Yeah.
And it can. It's just, we can sort of, and it does also go back to that, the weeks after the Buddha's awakening, where he wasn't sure what he was going to do, and he had to sort of be told to teach, and because otherwise he would have, otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why, I mean, for instance, Bhikkhu Nalyo, scholar of the early material, likes to differentiate sort of the framework of the early tradition from the Mahayana in just that way, because in the early tradition, the Buddha, I mean, he's reframed as sort of doing, searching for enlightenment out of compassion for all beings. But the actual, if you look at the actual text, the early texts, that's not the way it's framed from the Buddha's own perspective, because after becoming enlightened, there was even a question whether he would teach at all.
Right.
He was trying to overcome death. He was trying to overcome dukkha. He was, there were a number of very specific things in his life that he was trying to deal with. And after having made the attainment is when he began to realize, the compassionate aspect was important as well. Which, is just, there are different ways of coming at the same topic, I think, in the sense that, the later tradition then emphasizes that compassion directly, whereas the early tradition has more of a feeling that you work on self-perfection first, or self-betterment, whatever the personal growth, as Sundred Psyche put it. You work on that first, and then, presumably, you're better able to be compassionate in a helpful way, having sort of made some efforts on your own behalf first. Now, I mean, there's pluses and minuses about each approach. So, you have to be aware that, there's different strokes for different folks, and we can always make mistakes. But, I think that's one of the differences. And I should say, just in passing, that, I mean, I think you've made clear, that there are problems with this whole 4-stage issue. I mean, this whole 4 stages of progress. I mean, from a secular perspective, of course, the whole rebirth thing is extremely important in it. And I don't find that personally very useful. I mean, I find what's more useful is the idea that there are stages and fetters, that there are fetters that are easier to overcome. And there are other fetters, there are other of our mental habits, such as conceit, for example, that are very difficult to overcome. And so, we should be aware of the fact that we're going to have trouble with things like conceit or restlessness. We should not expect those to be simple. And so we shouldn't, if we find conceit and restlessness coming up in our practice, we shouldn't think, oh, I'm really bad at meditating, I mean, because it's not about, it's not the sort of thing that you should expect to be overcoming in a month or a year or even 10 years of practice.
Yeah. And of course, restlessness is generally a result of one of the fetters.
Yeah.
I mean, the restlessness itself isn't the fetter, right? But the fetter will cause the restlessness. In many ways. And
I think it is a fetter. I think it's one of the higher fetters, but I may be wrong.
Oh, one of the higher fetters. Okay.
Yeah, higher fetters.
Right.
Yeah.
But it causes the lower fetters, or it's caused by the lower fetters.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess one would say.
Yeah.
And the other question that undoubtedly comes up when people kind of read this stuff is, well, okay, so where is the non-returner hanging out again? What do you mean he's not they're not in the material realm? World? Where are they?
These immaterial realms. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
are they just,
I mean, you don't have to, I mean, again, if that sounds good to you, then by all means, go ahead and believe it. That's the traditional view. But I don't think you need to, spend a whole lot of time thinking about that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and of course, the Buddha was an arahant, and he was hanging around.
Here.
He was here. It's
Yeah,
this
right.
question of, you know,
Yeah.
how was he here? You know, you know, there was a presence. He was, manifest here,
Mhm.
but the material world didn't mean anything except that he had to eat. You know,
Yeah,
so
well, yeah,
yeah,
right. And it had other beings in it to be compassionate towards and so on.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So that was the importance of it, I guess, for him. We have
So
another.
this,
Yeah,
yeah, I
good.
love that. Ajahn Brahm, says the
Brahma.
identity was
Yeah.
a stream in itself. It has to be crossed. So crossing a stream of this different than entering a stream. But
That's
yeah, so
true.
you got
Yeah,
to
different.
cross
Yeah.
that stream of self, or of identity, and then you'll find a stream.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in
Yeah,
this
it's kind
world,
of
but not
interesting.
from
This
it.
I was going
Yeah,
to say there's the same a metaphor used in different ways. This stream entry versus crossing a stream. Um,
right.
Lots of stream
And there's the
metaphors.
stream of thought and the stream of consciousness, and it's like, oh, although those
Hmm.
aren't terms that are used in suttas per se. Yeah, and so yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's just something to uh, it's sort of like the hindrances as a checklist. It's like, well, if the hindrance is like, I'm not sleepy, and I'm not this, and I'm not that, and I'm not that. That's a moment of freedom. That's a moment of or samadhi. Like none of these. Um, yeah, thank you. I thought it was of
Yeah, we got a
not
comment from
of this,
Xiao Mao. Yeah,
correcting
in this
yourself.
world, but not of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, oh, all right. So are these fetters here or not? Are they gone completely? Or are they just not coming up very much? I mean, and so it's a way of kind of testing oneself. So in that sense, especially the stream enterer, the idea of the qualifications of a stream enterer, the qualities of a stream enterer, I should say. It's not like there's somebody at the gate of the stream saying, "Oh, you can't come in." Right? It's my own mind that's telling me I'm not there yet. And even a teacher, and this is where it gets dicey to me. It's like even a teacher isn't going to be able to really. Well, I suppose a really great teacher could ask the right question. And that reminds me of that funny story that I may have told once before around the yeah the Zen priest and the Zen teacher and the student, and the student's on one side of the river, and he's practicing, and he gets a messenger and says, "Please take this to the teacher. To the teacher that I've overcome all the worldly winds. I'm no longer battered around by this and that and this and that and this and that and this and that." And the teacher just writes back on the note, "Fart," and sends it back over to the student, who then gets really upset. It's
Of
like,
course.
guess there's that fetter that's still there.
Yep.
so,
Yep. Yep.
so, yeah, I mean, so in that sense, it's useful, as long as we don't take ourselves too seriously necessarily,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
where it can get challenging. And so and nor can you judge where somebody is in terms of these
Yeah.
factors. And as my friend did, it's like, oh, he's definitely at least a stream enterer. He was
Okay.
probably much further, actually, but it's like, how do you know?
Yeah. You
And
don't.
what are you basing that on? Just
Yeah.
the way he sits, maybe the way he moves, maybe.
And I think, if it's like, if the first stage of stream entry is sort of all about overcoming doubt, supposedly, according to the
Yeah,
traditional picture, um, you know, if you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, I'm a stream enterer," then you're going to be very, how do I want to say it? Uh, you're going to be very careful about not harboring doubts, right? I mean, any possible doubt that might arise in your mind, you're going to be like, no, I'm not going to listen to that because I'm a stream enterer. This kind of thing. And this is
Right.
where it can play tricks on you. So
for sure.
You may, just be wary of these things. That's the main
I have no doubt. Are you sure? Well, I haven't. Are you really? It's like, yeah, it's fascinating, and I mean, it's just fascinating how it plays out psychologically,
Exactly.
and so we just have to take it in, see how it resonates, and
let it go.
Yeah. So obviously our fetter of desire for coffee, we're just not there. We've got a long way to go.
That's a long way to go.
Although, yeah, I love coffee, and thank you for those of you that buy us coffee. We really appreciate it. And you can do that on our website. And
oh yes, I'll put it up. Diggingthedharma.com.
Supporting the show, yeah. And there's one thing to enjoy the coffee. It's another thing to be craving the coffee, and attached to the coffee. So I'm not going to let coffee stand in the way of my stream entry.
Or non-returning, maybe.
Yeah, whatever. But we will return next week.
That's right. We will.
So there you go. We're obviously not non-returners. Otherwise, how could we return? No, we will return next week with another episode of Digging the Dharma. And we're happy for those of you that were able to join us live. That's
great.
Really
we got
fun.
Some questions. Thank you so much.
Comments. Yeah. And be well. And
be well.
See you next week.